When we describe art as moving, just the word moving implies a change. You can think of those as physiologic changes. People colloquially will talk about experiencing chills or goosebumps when they have these intense experiences.
That's Dr. Anjan Chatterjee, professor of neurology and psychology at the University of Pennsylvania. Professor Chatterjee is director of the Penn Center for Neuroaesthetics, a very young field that's being deployed to help establish a biological basis for aesthetic experiences.
You can think of it as a change in our emotional state. So you get really engaged with something. It can be that you feel joyous, you feel pleasure, you feel enlightened, or you feel disgusted, you feel challenged. And then possibly a change in your cognitive state, which gets at an important question, which is, do we learn anything from art, right? If you do, then there's a change in something about your knowledge and how you potentially view the world that might be rendered through art. Imagery is an alternate way of expressing experiences that are perhaps sometimes hard to put into words. Aesthetic cognitivism makes the claim that engaging with art promotes understanding and advances knowledge. Starting as an empirical scientist, our goal was to establish a taxonomy that was both relevant to aesthetic cognitivism and would be useful for experimentation.
In the same way we have a vocabulary for the taste of wine, Professor Chatterjee is working to create a vocabulary for how we are impacted by various works of art.
What language allows us to do is to make discriminations that otherwise might feel vague. Once you have those words and you're tasting wine, you can kind of match those words with what your experience is, and you start to have a richer experience.
But what is this transformative power of art that Professor Chatterjee refers to?
Mark Rothko, there are examples of people feeling this feeling of crying and a kind of release of those emotions in the presence of Rothko. A moment in which I've been moved by art was an experience in Barcelona where I went into Gaudi's cathedral, La Familia Sagrada, and I didn't have much time. My plan was, I'm going to go there for hour and a half. I ended up not leaving, not seeing any of the rest of Barcelona, and it didn't matter.
So Professor Chatterjee worked to start building a vocabulary for these kinds of experiences by leveraging a diverse group of scholars and scientists.
We had people approaching this with a level of expertise from very different angles. So we invited a theologian, an art historian, a philosopher of art, and a psychologist, and I represented neuroscience. We asked them to give us a list of words that describe different kinds of art, and then a list of words that described what the impact of artwork could be on the viewer. We landed on 124 descriptive terms. Those included things like symbolic, or skilled, or emotional. And then in terms of impacts on the viewer, we landed on 69 terms that included things like transcendent, stimulated, provoked, intimate. The next phase of the project was to take these curated terms by experts and find out people at large, how do they think about these terms? And what we are able to do is look at the commonalities of how people associate these terms across a large group of people. We can start establishing which of these words lie closer to each other in what we're calling a semantic space and which are more distant from each other. We end up with 11 dimensions. You have both positive terms and negative terms. You have some that seem like they're more about emotions, others seems more about cognition. Our hope is that we will have a set of art images that have been normed on these kinds of impacts.
As Dr. Chatterjee and his team move from the conceptual work of semantic space to more empirical and experimental research, Their ultimate goal is to have scientifically reliable ways to measure, describe, and understand the particular types of cognitive and spiritual impact art is capable of.